أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمد ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي ربي زدني علما اللهم فقهنا في الدين آمين. So today I would like to welcome you to our teacher training session, and in this I will go over how to teach the Quran reading and writing book. And the purpose of this is so that you have a structure on how to teach the very basic students. Okay, so today inshallah we're going to be covering only a few topics. This is going to be part 1 of our teaching session, and this is the book that we're going to be studying from. It is called Ta'aleem al-Quran al-Qira'ah wal-Kitabah, Quran reading and writing, book 1. And inshallah this will be helpful to you as a guide in regards to how to teach this book, because there's many ways of people teaching this book, and inshallah khair, I'm going to be teaching you how we will do this how we will be offering this for Al-Huda online inshallah. So these are the topics that we will cover in today's training. The first one being the Arabic letters. We're going to talk about how to teach them, and then introduction of the Fathah, Kasrah, Dammah, Fathatain, Kasratain, Dammatain. So here we are, Huruful Hijai, and this is there are 29 Arabic letters in the language. So here we are, Huruful Hijai, and this is there are 29 Arabic letters in the language, and that is if you're counting the alif as well, that includes that, and then you have the total of 29 letters. When we're studying the huruf, this is very, very crucial, because here the students will learn the name of each letter, and when you start going over these letters, it is important that you are also teaching them on the side the makharij. So that will be like a supplementary studying. So if we look at the second point, so as you are teaching them like alif, ba, ta, you are going to also be teaching them the makharij alongside of that. So that way, once they have studied these Arabic letters, they have also studied the makharij of each letter, and inshallah that will aid them along with your reading to them. Okay, and then once students have completed the makharij, then as they move forward, they are going to be studying sifat side by side as well. So then inshallah, hopefully by the first 3 topics, they should have studied the makharij along with the sifat of each and every Arabic letter. Then we have the method of teaching. So how will you teach this page on the first page here? So first, what you will do inshallah is that you will actually read the first letter yourself. So for example, you will read each letter, and then the student will repeat after you. So if you have a one-on-one student, or if you have a group of students, each student has to repeat after you. And the reason why they have to do it one at a time is so that you are able to hear each letter of theirs. Okay, because if they're going to be reading it together, then you don't know if the student is pronouncing it correctly or not. So for example, you will say alif, and then the student will repeat after you. They will say alif. So let's say you have 5 students, then you will listen to 5 students say alif, individually. Then we will move to the letter ba, then the student will say ba, or depending on how many students you have. Letter ta, ta, tha, tha, jim, jim, ha, students saying ha, kha, kha, dal, dal, ذال ذال, را را, zai zai, or you can also say za. Both are acceptable. Za, sin sin, sheen sheen, sod, or here you can even say sod, dad, ta, dha, And again, the student repeats after you. Wa, Dha, Ain, Ain, Ghain, Ghain, Tha, Fa, Qaf, Qaf, Kaf, Kaf, Lam, Lam, Mim, Mim, Noon, Noon, Ha, Ha, Waw, Waw, Hamza, Ya, and then Hamza, Ya, also repeated by the student. And once they have done this, let's say, now you don't have to do all the letters in one stretch, okay? You can actually break it down. You can even just cover 5 letters in one session, make sure everybody's reading it correctly, everybody has proper letter recognition, and then once they have mastered these letters, like 5 letters, then you move on to the next 5. And you can also start because alongside you're going to be teaching the makharij, so it is important that you're taking both things together. You can also then come back to the sheet and say, okay, which letters did we just study from the makharij? And or you can go over the letters and then you can start teaching the makharij. So it's completely up to you. And then once they have practiced their letters 10 times each, like this is the minimum that they'll have to practice 10 times. What you're going to do then is you're going to ask them to read it backwards. And the reason why we ask them to read the letters backwards is to see how they do when you see the letters out of order, because everybody can say alif, ba, ta, tha, jim, ha, kha, and they don't sometimes even know which letter they're reading. But when you test them backwards, then you will know whether they have mastery over these letters. So you will ask them to read it backwards, so they should say it like this, and you can even read it for them first. Ya, Hamza, Waw, Ha, Noon, Mim, Lam, Kaf, Qaf, Fa, Ghain, Ain, Dha, Dha, Dad, Sad, Shin, Sin, Zai, Za, Ra, Dhal, Dal, Kha, Ha, Jim, Tha, Ta, Ba, Alif. Okay, so here, this is how you would teach this page right over here. And we will be moving on to the connecting letters. You feel very comfortable with how the students are able to recognize the letters along with their makharij. You may have started doing sifat with them, but even if you continue to do sifat with them after you have started the new topics, that's fine as well. Now here we're going to be talking about connecting the letters, that how the letters look like if they're outside of the order. So you will see here lam and then alif. So lam, alif. And then in the second line, we are shown how that is written together if these two letters were to come together. And here we have lam and alif. What I would advise you all to do is not to go over the third line, because we have not been introduced to this topic yet. Like we have not been introduced to the topic of Fathah or Sukoon. In the next examples, you can see that. So you can just show them on the first line and the second line how the letters look like once they're connected to each other. And you will go over all the letters in the way I have mentioned, that first you will say lam, alif, and then lam, alif. And that's all they have to do. And then you have ba, and then lam, ba, lam. So that way you will know that they are able to identify these letters even when they're connected. And you can show them, like, look at the difference when ba is on its own, how it looks like, and when ba is being connected, how does it look like? It's like half of the ba is gone, and you can really recognize the ba with its dot. So you can use like key features like that in order to describe like these letters. Even for the letter ain, you'll notice that only the head of the ain is remaining when it gets connected, and when it's the first letter, and then the bottom part is the tail end is gone. And the noon looks pretty much as is. Okay, so that is going to be my advice, and again they will practice this 10 times inshallah. Then we're going to be introducing the short vowel, which is the Fathah. Okay, this is the This is when now the letters have a haraka on them. So how are we going to pronounce it? You're going to first make them familiar with the sign. And the sign here is like a slanted line on top of the letters. And anytime you have that sign right there is called a fathah. Now, normally, sometimes people read it, with like a hamza, fathah, that is, up to you. That's your style choice. And, the way I've been taught is that you would just introduce that as a fathah, and you will tell them that now these letters is going to get the a sound. Now, this is also very important because a lot of times people make this either like very heavy, like they'll say oh, or they'll say a, like they will not open their mouth, because fathah means that we have to open our mouth whenever we are saying this. So this is like a nice image here, and this is how our mouth should be. It should be open, not too wide, not too little, and our tongue should be completely flat when we are saying, the harf maftuh, right? The letter that is has a fathah on it. Obviously, the tongue will be raised for the heavier letters, and you can actually, inshallah, introduce that here as well if you want. And this the more important point is opening of the mouth, right? So here you will say a, ba, ta, tha, and you have to try to be careful that you don't add like a hamza at the end. You don't say tha, you don't make the sound too abrupt. Try to keep it soft. Tha, ja, ha, kha. Okay, and then again, once you read it, you have to also make sure your student is repeating after you. So for example, you say a, then the student will say a. Or if you have 5 students, each will say a, and you will listen to it. Then you have the letter ba, and again, you should have the student repeat after you, ba. Then you have ta, ta, tha, tha, ja, ja, ha, ha, kha, kha. And here you can actually make a point telling them that, this letter here is heavier. If you just hear my sound, it sounds like sounds heavy compared to the other letters that I just read. And you can say that. You don't have to introduce them to isti'ala or anything unless you have already done sifat with them at this point. Then you can mention that this letter has isti'ala and it is going to be mufakham, right? It is going to be heavy. So it's completely up to your discretion. And then you will say da, then you have da. Da, student will say da. Ra, ra here obviously with the fathah it's going to be a heavy letter, so you have to mention that as well. Because in the next one you can mention that it's not heavy, right? When it has a kasrah underneath it. Then you have za, sa, sha, so, do. And again, you want to keep making sure your student is reading after you. Wa, la, a, ga, fa, qa, ka, la, ma, na, ha, wa, ya. And here's something to note that the students you have to inshallah watch out for. If you have their video on, then you are able to see it much more clearly. It's more harder if you're not able to see them. That when they are reading the heavy letters, then it's important that they don't round their lips. Okay, they're only using the help of their tongue to make the letter heavy, but they're not going to round their mouth in order to say these letters. And once you have gone over all of this, and they've let's say they've practiced each letter 10 times, then again you're going to do what we have already mentioned in the previous page as well, that you're going to make them read it backwards, because that will really test how much they have mastered these letters, with the fathah. So then you will have ya, wa, ha, na, ma, la, ka, a, fa, ga, a, ض ط ض ص ش س ز ر ذ د خ ح ج ث د ب أ. Okay, so inshallah that way you will really know if the student has done, mastered this concept of Fathah. And again, you will also introduce them, if you want, to the concept of one count, that whenever there's a haraka on the Fathah, then it's only one count. That's the time that you have assigned to this haraka right? That's the pace that I'm going to be reciting at. Okay, so now we are on to how to teach the practice page. Okay, now this is very, very important because this is where students will learn quite a lot of concepts. And again, the purpose of us doing this is so that the students' foundation is very strong. Okay, they have a very strong foundation and they are not going to be struggling in reciting the Quran because their foundation is so strong. Because if what ends up happening is that if you're going to the Quran right away before their foundation is strong, then they will constantly struggle with the basics. But if their basics are strong, then everything that you build on that is going to be very, very strong. So when we are going to be studying the Fathah, the practice for Fathah, we come on these examples here. And in this case, you'll see that there are 3-letter words. So there are going to be, again, you're going to read them yourself, and then the student will repeat after you. So for example, in the first word, there's going to be 3 ways of reading each example. Okay? I know it seems like a lot, but the student will really learn this and master this, and they will do really, really good in their future reading. So the first way is going to be a, then you pause, ma, pause, then ra. A, ma, ra. And then the student will repeat after you. A, ma, ra. So notice I did not read it all together. I have broken it up. Okay, I'm pausing after each letter. And then the second way of reading would be reading it all together without any pauses. Amara. Amara. Then we have the third way of reading. Now in the third way of reading, what will happen is that you will actually put a sukoon on the ra. Okay, you're going to put a sukoon on the ra, and then you will actually introduce that. Then hey, look, we're going to be now stopping on the ra, and we can't just stop on the ra without, you can say, just like you're just reading it as is. No, it has to be, sorry, I'm trying to make it into a sukoon here. The way it's done is that you have to remove the haraka when we're stopping. So when we're stopping on the ra, it will not have any haraka on it. That's just the way we stop on the word. Okay, so you can actually show them how to read it without a haraka. So now what ends up happening is that when we're stopping, there is a sukoon on the ra, and the sukoon basically refers to that there is no haraka on that letter. So when we're reading it, how would we read it? Amar. Amar. Okay, so you will see that the Fathah is now gone and we no longer read the Fathah. Okay, so that is 3 ways, and then the student will repeat after you. Amar. So now the student has, once you have given them, you have practiced with them, they will now practice it this 10 times in 3 ways. So first they will practice a, ma, ra, and again you're going to explain to them that the ra is heavy because of the Fathah, and then altogether amara, and then when you're stopping, amaru. And you can also tell them that, okay, why are we making the ra heavy here? It is because when we're stopping, we're looking at the haraka before this. Okay, so now again you'll notice that you're teaching them concepts before even actually teaching them formally, like theory subjects. So inshallah, with repetition, it will become second-hand knowledge to them. Okay, then we come to the next example. Ba, la, gha. Ba, la, gha. So again, now we want your student to repeat after you. Again, this is the first way. Ba, la, gha. And then all together, ba, la, gha. Your student will repeat after you. balagha. And then again, you're going to tell your student that because we're stopping, the third way is stopping, what happens to the fathah? By this time, they will know that, oh yes, when we're stopping, there will be a sukoon on the last letter, which is the letter ghain. And here, you will, then the fathah on the ghain goes away, and you will say balagh. Okay, and here you might want to also hear for any sifat, if you have studied it already, that okay, are they giving it enough time, like that you can, in terms of the timing as well of the letters. Okay, now let's move to the next one, where they're going to be actually learning a new concept as well, and that is inshallah when we're stopping. So again, ta, ra, ka, ta, ra, ka. And then when you're, the second way is all together, ta, ra, ka. And then the student will also recite after you, ta, ra, ka. And then when you're stopping, you will let the student know that, that when you're stopping, make sure you are applying the hams on the ka. So you will say, ta, ra, k. Okay, because there's going to be a sukoon on the kaf. Okay, and then another important point is that you're going to mark that there is a kaf here, sorry, a hams here. Okay, so you can actually put H there for them. Okay, so I'm just going to show you how that would be. So you can ask the students to mark that there's a hams here, and hopefully if they have studied it in Safat, that's great, but if they have not, that's okay as well, and you can just let them know. Okay, so that stands for hams, H. So when they're stopping on the word, only when they're stopping, you will say tarak. Okay, now that will be repeated for these two words as well, same thing. And then the next day, let's say you have only reached till 3 words, the next day the student will recite to you in 3 ways each example. Okay, now another concept that will be introduced in this page will be of qalqala. So let's look at how that would be done in this word here. We have the word ha, sa, da. Then the student will repeat ha, sa, da. Then all together, hasada. And then when you're stopping, again, there will be a sukoon on the dal. Correct? And then not only that, we will also do qalqala. And for the qalqala, and again, if they have done sifat, then you will, it will be easy for you to explain to them. But if not, then you can explain to them that there are 5 letters, and these 5 letters, when they have a sukoon on them, then we have to do qalqala. And I have put the letter Q on top to identify that okay, I will, when I'm stopping, the dal has a sukoon, then you will be doing qalqala there. So you will say hasade, hasade, and that is indicating that I am doing qalqala there, and then the student will repeat after you. So this is very important, like putting the rules down on top of these examples will really help solidify the understanding that the student has. Okay, and over here we have the 5 letters, so you can actually introduce them to that. You can say ajidu qatin bakat, right? So you can introduce these 5 letters of qalqala. Okay, so that, I hope that is clear for you, and you will repeat that all the way until the end, inshallah. We have studied our Fathah, the topic of Fathah. Now we will move on to our Kasrah. And in Kasrah, Fathah, Kasrah, and Dammah, the most important thing about them is their formulation in terms of the mouth and the tongue. So when you're introducing the Kasrah, you will now mention that it's a line that you see underneath the letter. And for this, the important part is to make sure we are bringing our jaw down and the tongue is slightly raised from the middle. Okay, as you can see in this image. And you don't have to show this image. This is more for you as a teacher to know that what is the correct way of articulating this the kasrah here. And it's important that we don't introduce them to wrong things. That, for example, some people say like make a smiley face. So that's not really something that needs to be taught. It's not the correct way. It is only coming the lowering of the jaw, and the middle part is raised slightly. Okay, that is how we would pronounce the kasrah, when it's underneath the letter. And here, again, it will be the same method. You will, if you can show the student yourself how to say it, like for example, you're able to show them yourself in the video, that is very good. But if not, then make sure that you are able to see if they're, bringing their jaw down, or, you should be able to hear a complete sound, a completion of the haraka. So here you will say E, B. So that is a sound that you will get when the kasrah is underneath the letter. And then the student will repeat after you, okay? As you notice, it is very important that you check the student's, pronunciation as well. So E, then the student will say E. B, student will say B. T, T. Thi, Thi. G, G. He, He. Chi, Chi. D, D. The, the. And notice the ra is light when it has a kasrah. Even the heavy letters are not as heavy when they have a kasrah as well. The next is z, z. Si, si. She, she. Sli, sli. Li, li. Li, li. Li, li. Now here in these 4 letters, it's important that the students don't say like an we sound, like we. It should be completely flat, like a kasrah. And then they will say, and they don't use the help of their lips to make the letters heavy either. So if you look at the position of the lips, it's not rounded. Okay. Next we have I. Then we have, again, the student will say I, ri, ri, fi, fi, qi, qi, ki, ki, li, li, mi, mi, ni, ni, he, he, we, ye, ye. Okay, and then once they have mastered this, they have read it with you, then you will ask them to practice 10 times, and then you will listen to them the next day, and then you will also have to again make them read it backwards. Okay, as I said, it's very uncomfortable for the students, so then you will really know how well they're doing in their pronunciation. So you will say ye, we, he, ni, mi, li, ki, qi, fi, ri, I, li, qi, li, si, she, si, zi, ri, the, di, chi, he, ji, thi, ti, bi, e. Now we're going to move to our practice. Now in this practice, again, it's going to be read again in the 3 ways that I had mentioned earlier for the Fathah practice. And here, first you're going to show them how to read it separately. Each letter is read separately. A, the, na. And then the student will repeat after you. Adina. And then when you're reading it all together, there's no pause in between. Adina. So now here, because the 2 topics are coming together, we have the Fathah and the Kasrah. So you have to remind them of the mouth position. That for the Fathah, you will open your mouth, and then for the Kasrah, you will bring your jaw down. Okay? And then for the Noon again, you will open your mouth. Adina. And then when we're stopping, again, there is the sukoon there. If you remember, we're going to remind them again that the Fathah, for the Fathah, what happens if you're stopping? The Fathah will go away, and then there will be no haraka there. It will be sakin. So that is called a sukoon, this shape here. So then when they're stopping, they will say adin. Adin. Okay, and then they will repeat after you. And something that will be introduced over here that we didn't see in previous example is the concept of mad asli. Okay, so here, because we're going to be stopping, so then the student will be introduced to that. So you will, inshallah, teach them that as well, because in stopping, they will come across this. So let's look at this example in particular. So again, baqiya. So then the student will repeat after you the first way, baqiya. And then all together, baqiya. And then when you're stopping, what will happen? You will stretch that for. Now, first of all, before stretching, you will tell them that, okay, what happens to the Fathah when we are stopping on it? They will say, okay, well, it goes away. The Fathah will not be read. And instead, we're going to get a sukoon there, right? So what happens when, then you will explain to them something that whenever there is a sukoon on the ya, and before that we have a letter that is coming here that has a kasrah, then you will stretch that 2 counts. Okay, so that stretching of 2 counts means that, if you remember, we talked about the 1 count earlier, that 1 haraka means 1 count. Now you will double that timing. So you will basically stretch it now for 2 counts. So instead of saying baqiya, when we are stopping, we will say baqi. So that is 2 counts. Okay, so inshallah, I can actually add that here to let them know, the students, that this is going to be 2 counts here, instead of just, because that's what happens when you have a kasrah followed by a ya with a sukoon, and then they can put the 2 here to let them know that. Okay, and if you remember, everything that, every rule that they will have like a marking for that, like if it's a qalqala, if it's a hams, or other rules. Inshallah, in the future I will let you know. And again, you will see here, it will come up here again, kha shi ya, khashiya. Okay, and then when you're stopping, then you'll remind them that, okay, remember there's a sukoon on the ya, and then when we're stopping, then we have we're going to, there's a kasra before that on the sheen, and then ya has a sukoon, so then we have to stretch that 2 counts. So you will say khashi. Okay, and again, the purpose of us teaching all these 3 ways is that the student will feel very independent when they're reading. So they will be able to dissect a word, any word that's very tough, they can read it separately, and then they will also know how to stop on that word. Okay, so then once they start reciting the Quran, they will not struggle with stopping. Okay, so that's all for this one. Now let's move on to our Dammah. Okay, now Dammah is very interesting as well. Dammah is represented by this small little wow sign on top of a letter, and this indicates that we have to, it's the oo sound that will be there, added to the letters. Okay, so you go to the makhraj, and then you will round your lips, and then you will say the sound oo. Okay, now here, what is the position of our lips when we are saying the Dammah? It means that our mouth is completely round. Okay, our mouth is completely round, like ooh, like if you were to think of like a straw, you're drinking from a straw, and then your lips are completely rounded. Okay, and if you notice, our tongue will be slightly raised from the back as well. That just naturally happens. You don't have to do anything to do that. And if you look at the mouth position from the sideways, this is how it would look when the lips are rounded. So this is something that you make sure that you see if the student is doing, in order to make sure that they are completing the haraka. Itmam al-haraka, which means to complete the haraka, u. So we have Fathah, a, open your mouth, Kasrah, we bring it down, e, and then we have a Dammah for rounding our lips. We round our lips for that, u. So you will read this with the students, u, and then they will repeat after you, u, bu, tu, thu, ju, hu, khu, du, dhu, ru. Now for the ra, here you will let them know that when it has a Dammah, it will be heavy. Okay, zu, su, shu, su, lu, tu, dhu, ru, ru, fu, u, ku, lu, mu, nu, wu, wu, you. And then again, once they have read this, they have mastered this, then you're going to ask them to go backwards. You, wu, hu, nu, mu, lu, ku, u, fu, ru, ru, dhu, tu, du, su, shu, su, zu, ru, dhu, du, hu, hu, ju, thu, tu, bu, u. Okay, then we come to the practice, and now this is where the students pretty much won't be needing to be introduced to any new things because they've already studied everything that they need to know. And in this case, what you want to focus on is their mouth positioning, that it is correct. The makhraj is pretty good. By this point, it should be. So, for example, here we have u, rounding of the lips, fi, bringing the jaw down, ka, open the mouth, u, fi, ka, u, fi, ka. And then if they are, then they're going to read it all together, u, fi, ka. And then when they're stopping, you will say u, fi, k. Right? There is going to be the hams there. So again, they are going to mark that. They will label that there, that I have to do hums. And it's very important that you focus on the marking, because inshallah it will become very solidified, their knowledge in this. Okay, so this will really aid them in their reading. And then here we have bu, ri, ya, bughiya, bughi. And again, you can ask them to see if they remember how they would stop here. And inshallah khayr, they will remember, okay, because they've done it many times by now. And they can put the number 2 there to indicate that they're stretching this for 2 counts. Okay, and then I will take one example of the one with the qalqala. So then here we have khuliqa, khuliqa, khuliqu. So then you can see if they remember that, okay, when there is a sukoon on the letter, then we have to do qalqala. So in the stopping, we will do qalqala. Okay, so I think that's about it in regards to everything that needed to be covered. And in regards to the writing practice, they can also do the writing and do the practice as well. And it's up to you if you would like to actually ask them to share their pages on a group for the sake of making it interactive, and see if they once they have completed reading it 10 times, their practices, and they have written, they have done the writing, then they can share their homework on a group as well, to indicate that they have completed this practice at least 10 times. This is the minimum. Okay, Jazakumullah khairan. We have studied 4 topics. We have done the Arabic letters, then we have done the Fathah and the Kasrah and the Dammah. Now it's important to note that we have you're going to be teaching the makharij alongside the Arabic letters, and when you're teaching the topics of Fathah, Kasrah, Dammah, then you are teaching sifat alongside with that. And you notice by the topic of Dammah, they should have their makharij and sifat on their fingertips. That should be the goal, inshallah. And again, if you are not able to teach them sifat up until Dammah, that's fine. You can continue on till they go to the next subject as well. Jazakumullah khair, everybody. Inshallah, now after this, we will study the next topics as well. Jazakumullah khair. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.